Welcome back to the Black and Gold Report. I'm Kevin Freeman. It's time to talk a little bit of cross country with head coach Gary Aycock. Coach, you got the Peach Belt Championships coming right around the corner, so we're glad to have you before the tournament.
Thanks for having me.
Let's talk a little bit about the teams. Last time you and I talked a few weeks ago, I sort of broke it down between men's and women's, but I wanted to go ahead and combine them in my questions this time since they're doing a lot of the same tournaments. I wanted to start with the Charlotte Invitational at the end of September. The women, they finished 21st overall, first among Division II schools. The men were 22nd and finished second overall among D2 schools. Were you happy with the performances at Charlotte?
Happy? I don't know that that's the way I'd answer that question. I was pleased. I mean, 300 competitors in each race, and some big-time Division I schools: Virginia Tech, Georgia, Wake Forest, to just name a few. I think we did okay. It really exposed some of our weaknesses, and that is the lack of team scoring and running negative splits towards the end of a race. But in hindsight, I think it really gave us some experience running big-time races, which will help for the Peach Belt Championships and the Region Championships coming up in November.
Okay, next up for you guys was the Haggen Stone Cross Country Classic, and it's a little different from some of the other tournaments that you've entered before. You only entered one woman on the women's side and two on the men's side. Just a little bit about that. Carrie Blankenship finished 54th out of 114 on the women's side. Zach Millsaps was 14. Tyler Moore 34th for the men. First, why did you only enter one or two runners in each of those tournaments?
Well, what we used Haggen Stone for is a twofold answer. Carrie was coming off some injuries. We needed to get another solid race performance under her belt, and she responded fairly well to the race at Haggen Stone. On the other hand, we had Zach Millsaps and Jeremy Judd, and I just wanted to get these guys, Zach being a freshman, Jeremy being a sophomore, just a little bit more race experience at 8,000 meters. So when we come to the Peach Belt Championships in the region, it's not a question of can I race this distance, but how well can I perform at this distance, and they ran fairly well.
Okay, well, most recently you entered the four-team Winget PreSAC meet. I assume it's a tournament, a meet primarily for the SAC schools, of course. The women finished second, the men finished third. Was this intended to be a prep? Were you thinking about this meet as a prep for the Peach Belt tournament, which is coming up on October the 20th, and we'll talk a little bit about the Peach Belt later?
Right. Being about 10 days out from the Peach Belt Championship was when Winget, the PreSAC race, was held. And I really went into this race wanting it to be a very concentrated practice on, working on our weaknesses. So what I did with the women's race, I had them go out in the first mile and run 7 minutes flat. Then the second mile, they would run 6:30 and then race the last mile. So we learned to race the end of our big meets. At mile 1, I think our group of 5 women were together, and we were nearly a minute behind the number 1 runner from Winget. But as the race progressed, going into mile 3, they were right there on the tail of the leaders, and the women actually ended up losing only 3 points to Winget in the race when they were in last place at the first mile. And again, a very controlled effort. The beginning of the race, and they just raced through the race, climbing the ladder, picking off opponents until they nearly won the meet at the end. Men's race, exactly the same thing. I set them up to go 6 minutes, 5:30, and then race the last mile. Again, we need to concentrate our efforts, because we're so young on the men's side, is racing that last mile and getting the confidence to run fast at the end of the longer races.
So you use this match really as a grandiose practice, just to sort of work some things out and to get your pacing right for the Peach Belt tournament, which really counts the most. Well, Pardon Luvu entered. He didn't race in this one. He entered the NCAA Division I PreNationals invitation, and he finished third amongst that group. First, how does a Division II runner get an invitation to a Division I race?
Well, he'd raced well against Division I opponents all year, at the Winthrop race finishing third and actually winning the race at UNC Charlotte against some big-time ACC schools. So it took some begging on my part. I knew that we needed a competitive race for Pardon. And this time of year, the Division I pre-national meet was going to be the only race on the East Coast that he would have a shot at being challenged. So it took me calling the coach from University of Louisville, calling the meet director from Louisville, and really pleading my case and supporting documentation from some other coaches that he'd run against, to include the University of Louisville coach. And we got him into the race, and he raced very well. I mean, it was a race that I had high expectations for him, and finishing third out of nearly 275 athletes at the Division I level as a Division II athlete.
And I suspect they're pretty happy that they decided to let him in the race, given how well he did. We're going to take our next break. We're going to come back and talk to Coach Aycock about the upcoming Peach Belt Championships.